The notification from my banking app lit up my phone at exactly 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. I remember the time precisely because I was in the middle of a quarterly financial review meeting when my world started to crack. My name is Evie, and I used to think I had my life perfectly arranged, like the spreadsheets I spend my days analyzing. The message showed a withdrawal of $47,000 from our joint savings account. My stomach dropped as I stared at the screen, the numbers burning into my retinas while my colleague's voice faded into white noise. Evie? The Thompson account projections? I snapped my head up, meeting my supervisor's questioning gaze. Sorry, I just need to. Excuse me for a moment. I grabbed my phone and practically ran to the bathroom, my heels clicking against the marble floor in an uneven rhythm. With trembling fingers, I called Travis. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. Of course. My husband's phone was perpetually set to silent when he was in the zone with his photography. I tried again. And again. Finally, on the 4th attempt, "Hey babe, what's up? I'm kind of in the middle of a shoot. Travis, why is there a $47,000 withdrawal from our account?" My voice echoed off the bathroom tiles, and I lowered it to a harsh whisper. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. There was a pause, too long to be innocent. Oh, that. Yeah, I was going to tell you about it tonight. It's for some new equipment I need for this huge corporate gig I landed. The client's paying double my usual rate, so we'll have it back in no time. The explanation seemed reasonable enough, but something in his tone made my skin prickle. After 8 years of marriage, I knew when Travis was feeding me half-truths. What equipment costs exactly $47,000? I pressed. Listen, I can't really talk right now. The client's waiting. We'll discuss it over dinner, okay? Love you. He hung up before I could respond. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, noting how the fluorescent lights made me look as pale as I felt. Something wasn't adding up, and if there's one thing I can't stand, it's numbers that don't balance. Back at my desk, I couldn't focus on work. Instead of analyzing market trends, I found myself logging into our online banking portal. The withdrawal had been made in cash, at a branch across town. Travis hadn't used his card for any major photography equipment purchases recently. In fact, looking at his transaction history, there was a pattern of increasingly large withdrawals over the past few months that I'd somehow missed. When I got home that evening, the house was dark. A text from Travis said he'd be late, the shoot was running over. I sat in our home office, the blue light from his laptop casting shadows on the wall. He always left it logged in, trusting me completely. Or maybe he was just careless. I hesitated only a moment before opening his email. It felt wrong, invasive, but the nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't let go. That's when I found the folder labeled Investment Opportunities. Inside were hundreds of emails from online gambling sites, payment confirmations, and desperate messages to someone named Victor about making things right. My phone buzzed with another text from Travis, "Grabbed dinner with the client. Don't wait up. Tomorrow night, I promise we'll talk." I closed the laptop and walked to our bedroom, where I opened his side of the closet. Behind his carefully arranged camera equipment and the vintage leather jacket I'd given him for his birthday, I found a stack of papers stuffed into an old shoebox. Bank statements, loan applications, and at the bottom, a letter from a collection agency demanding immediate payment of $86,000. The Travis I thought I knew would never hide something like this. But then again, maybe I never really knew Travis at all. And that realization scared me more than any number on those statements. I barely slept that night, watching Travis's side of the bed remain empty until dawn. When he finally stumbled in around 6 a.m., I pretended to be asleep, studying him through barely open eyes as he kicked off his shoes and collapsed fully clothed onto the mattress. My brother Sam's law office was only a 10-minute walk from my workplace, but it felt like miles that morning. Each step was heavy with the weight of what I'd discovered. When I arrived, his secretary waved me straight through. Being the boss's sister had its perks. "You look like hell," Sam said, not looking up from his computer. When I didn't respond with our usual banter, he finally raised his eyes. "Evie?" I dropped the stack of papers I'd found in Travis's closet onto his desk. "I need your help." Sam picked up the collection notice, his expression darkening as he read. "Jesus Christ. 86,000? Plus the 47 from your savings?" He shuffled through the papers, his lawyer face settling in. "How long has this been going on?" "I don't know." My voice cracked. "I thought I knew everything about our finances." "I'm supposed to be good at this, Sam. It's literally my job." "This isn't your fault." Sam leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his graying hair. "Remember when Travis bought that vintage Harley right before your wedding? He sold it 3 months later. Said it wasn't practical." "No, Evie. He crashed it. Totally wrecked. But instead of telling you, he took out a personal loan to replace it before you found out." Sam's words hit me like a punch to the gut. I helped him with the paperwork. He swore it was a one-time thing, that he'd learned his lesson. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "Why didn't you tell me?" He was about to become my brother-in-law. He seemed genuinely sorry, and the amount was manageable. Sam's face softened. "I should have told you. I'm sorry." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Travis's mother, "Maggie, dinner tonight? Haven't seen you both in ages. 7 p.m.? I showed Sam the message. He shook his head. "You should go. Keep things normal while we figure this out. I'll make some calls, see what kind of legal exposure you're facing." That evening, I arrived at Maggie's colonial-style house alone, having told Travis to meet me there after his shoot. The familiar scent of her lasagna filled the air as she pulled me into a warm hug. "Where's my boy?" she asked, leading me into the kitchen. "Running late. Client meeting." The lie felt bitter on my tongue. "Oh, he's been so busy lately. Did he show you the beautiful watch he bought last week?" Said it was a gift for a friend who helped him land that big corporate contract. My hand froze on the wine glass I was reaching for. "A watch? Aha. Must have cost a fortune. You know how Travis is, always going overboard with gifts. Remember that gorgeous painting he bought me last month? The artist was such a lovely young thing. What was her name? Lila something?" The room suddenly felt too warm. "I don't think Travis mentioned her." "Oh, you should see her work. She has this little gallery downtown. Travis has been helping her with photography for her upcoming show. Such a generous boy, just like his father." The front door opened, and Travis's voice called out, "Something smells amazing." He appeared in the kitchen doorway, and for a moment, I saw him through new eyes. His carefully tousled hair, the expensive camera bag slung over his shoulder, the easy smile that had made me fall in love with him. All of it felt like a carefully constructed facade. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing his mother's cheek before moving to do the same to me. I turned my head slightly, making his lips land on my jaw instead of my mouth. If he noticed, he didn't show it. "Travis, honey," Maggie said, "I was just telling Evie about that beautiful watch you bought." "The one for your friend?" I watched his face carefully, noting the slight tightening around his eyes. The way his hand paused for a fraction of a second as he reached for the wine bottle. "Oh, right," he said smoothly. "Just a thank you gift for a client referral." 3 lies in one evening, and dinner hadn't even started yet. I took a long sip of wine, wondering how many more revelations were waiting to shatter what remained of my marriage. The business card felt heavy in my hand. Davidson Investigations, discretion guaranteed. Sam had slipped it to me after that disastrous dinner at Maggie's, along with a stern warning about keeping everything legal. 3 days later, I sat across from Mike Davidson in his downtown office, watching him scroll through the photos on his tablet. "Your husband's been busy," he said, turning the screen toward me. "These are from the past week." The first image showed Travis entering what looked like a rundown sports bar. The timestamp read 2:14 p.m., right when he'd told me he was meeting with clients. The next showed him leaving 3 hours later, looking considerably more disheveled. But it was the third photo that made my stomach lurch. Travis was standing outside an art gallery, his hand on the small of a woman's back. She was laughing, her head thrown back, dark curls cascading down her shoulders. Even from the grainy surveillance photo, I could tell she was beautiful. "That's Lila Bennett," Davidson said, his voice matter-of-fact. "She owns the gallery. Your husband's been there 6 times in the past 2 weeks, usually staying for several hours." My throat felt tight. "The watch?" Davidson nodded, swiping to another photo. Travis and Lila outside a high-end jewelry store, his arm around her waist. The timestamp matched the day of the $47,000 withdrawal. "There's more," Davidson said, hesitating. "The sports bar? It's a known front for illegal gambling. Your husband's got himself mixed up with some dangerous people. A man named Victor Ramirez runs the operation." Victor. The name from the emails. "How much does he owe?" Davidson pulled out a manila envelope. "Based on our surveillance and some conversations with inside sources, we estimate around $200,000. The $86,000 collection notice you found? That's just the tip of the iceberg." The room started spinning. $200,000. Our entire savings, gone. Our future, evaporated. "Mrs. Mitchell." "Parker," I corrected automatically. I'd kept my name after marriage, something that had always bothered Travis's mother. "Mrs. Parker, there's something else you should know." Davidson's expression softened slightly. "The gallery? It's not doing well. According to public records, it's 3 months behind on rent. But last week, someone paid all the back rent in cash." My laugh came out hollow. "Let me guess. Right after the withdrawal?" Davidson nodded. "Your husband's playing a dangerous game. These people don't mess around when it comes to collecting debts." That night, I waited up for Travis. He came home around midnight, smelling of expensive cologne that wasn't his usual brand. When he kissed my cheek, I had to force myself not to flinch. "How was your day?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Good. Productive. Got that corporate campaign wrapped up finally." He loosened his tie, heading for the shower. "The one you needed the equipment for?" He paused. "Yeah, that one." "Funny," I said, following him into the bathroom. "Because I called your regular clients today. None of them have hired you for any corporate work recently." Travis froze, his hand on the shower door. "You did what?" "Where's the equipment, Travis? The stuff you spent our savings on? You're checking up on me now?" His voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. "Going behind my back? Like you went behind mine with Lila?" The color drained from his face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the drip of the faucet, marking time like a metronome. "It's not what you think," he finally said. "Really?" "Because I think you're gambling away our future while buying expensive gifts for another woman." My voice cracked. "I think you're lying to me, to your mother, to everyone." "Evie, please." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Tell your husband he has 48 hours to pay what he owes, or things get uncomfortable." V. I held up the phone, watching Travis's face crumple as he read the message. Who's Victor, Travis? And what exactly happens when things get uncomfortable? Travis's confession came in pieces, each one more devastating than the last. We sat in our kitchen as dawn crept through the windows, the threat from Victor hanging between us like a blade. I can fix this, Travis kept saying, his hands shaking as he poured his third cup of coffee. I just need a little more time. Time for what? To lose more money? To buy more watches for Lila? His head snapped up. Leave her out of this. She has nothing to do with. With what? The gambling? The lies? Or just the part where you're destroying our life? The silence that followed felt like glass about to shatter. I pulled out Davidson's photos, spreading them across the kitchen table like a twisted timeline of betrayal. $200,000, Travis. Where did you think this would end? He stared at the photos, his face ashen. I was winning at first. Big wins. The kind of money that could set us up for life. Then Victor offered to stake me for bigger games, and he trailed off, running his hands through his hair. I just needed one more good hand. One more chance to make it right. And Lila? Was she just another bet? She's a friend. That's all. But he wouldn't meet my eyes. The gallery was going under. I couldn't let that happen. So you used our savings? Money we worked for, planned for? I used my inheritance from Dad. His voice was barely a whisper. The room tilted sideways. What inheritance? The life insurance money. It came through last month. I never told you because. He swallowed hard. Because I'd already lost most of it by then. I grabbed the edge of the table, steadying myself. The insurance money was supposed to be substantial, enough to start the photography studio Travis had always dreamed about. The future we'd planned together. How much was it? $300,000. My laugh came out like broken glass. So you're telling me you've lost $500,000? Our savings, the insurance, and now you owe money to criminals? Travis reached for my hand. I pulled away, my wedding ring catching the morning light. The same ring he'd insisted on upgrading last year, claiming his business was doing well enough to afford it. Was that bought with gambling money too? His silence was answer enough. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Victor, time's running out. Meeting at the usual place. 3 p.m. Bring the money or bring a lawyer. I'll talk to him, Travis said, reading over my shoulder. Maybe I can negotiate. No. I stood up, my decision crystallizing. You're done negotiating. Done gambling. Done lying. What are you going to do? I grabbed my car keys. I'm going to meet Lila. Evie, don't. You lost the right to tell me what to do when you bet our future on a poker game. The drive to Lila's gallery took 20 minutes. Each mile brought a new question, a new doubt. Had they laughed about me together? Had he told her about our fights, our dreams, our struggles? The gallery was small but elegant, tucked between a coffee shop and a vintage bookstore. Through the window, I could see her arranging photographs on a white wall. Travis's photographs. My husband's art, displayed like love letters for everyone to see. The bell chimed as I pushed open the door. Lila turned, her smile warm and professional. Welcome to Bennett Gallery. How can I? I'm Evie Parker. I watched recognition flash across her face. Or as you might know me, Travis Mitchell's wife. She dropped the photograph she was holding. It hit the floor with a crack, the glass splintering across the polished concrete. In that broken reflection, I saw both our faces, two women caught in the same man's web of lies. His wife? Her voice trembled. But he said he was divorced. That his ex-wife. Let me guess. That his ex-wife took everything in the settlement? That he's still paying off her debts? Lila sank into a nearby chair, her face draining of color. Oh God. The money he gave me for the gallery was stolen, I finished. Just like everything else. Lila and I sat in her back office, 2 cups of untouched coffee growing cold between us. Her gallery walls were covered in Travis's photographs, moments he'd captured while lying to us both. I recognized some of them from the days he'd claimed to be at client meetings. He said the money was from his photography business, Lila whispered, staring at her trembling hands. That he wanted to invest in emerging artists. My phone buzzed again. 2 hours until Victor's deadline. Did he ever mention gambling? I asked. She shook her head, then stopped. Wait. There was this one night. He was acting strange, kept checking his phone. Said he needed to meet someone about an investment opportunity. When he came back. She swallowed hard. His knuckles were bruised. The gallery door chimed. We both turned to see Travis stumbling in, his face pale and sweating. Evie, please, you can't be here, he froze when he saw Lila. I can explain everything. Like you explained being divorced? Lila stood up, her artist's hands clenched into fists. Or how you explained the gallery money. I was going to pay it back. All of it. Victor just needs. Victor? Lila's voice cracked. The same Victor who sent those men here last week? I felt the blood drain from my face. What men? They came looking for Travis. Said something about collateral. She hugged herself, shrinking into herself. They took some of the artwork. Said it was insurance. Travis stepped forward. Lila, I'm so sorry. I never meant. The sharp crack of her palm against his cheek echoed through the gallery. Get out. Both of you. I'm calling the police. You can't, Travis pleaded. Victor will. Will what? I demanded. Hurt us. Like he hurt you that night? Before Travis could answer, the gallery door chimed again. 2 men in expensive suits entered, their presence filling the small space like smoke before a fire. Time's up, Mitchell, the taller one said. Victor's waiting. Travis's face went from pale to gray. I just need 1 more day. No more days. The man's eyes swept over the gallery, lingering on Lila's frightened face before settling on me. Though maybe we can work something out. Victor's always had an eye for alternative payment methods. I felt something snap inside me, not like breaking, but like a lock clicking open. All the fear and hurt of the past weeks crystallized into something harder, colder. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I'd like to speak to Victor myself. Evie, don't, Travis started. Shut up. My voice was ice. You've done enough talking. I turned to the men. Tell Victor the first have a proposition. One that involves Travis's inheritance money. The shorter man raised an eyebrow. The insurance payout's gone, lady. Your husband blew through it weeks ago. No, I smiled, pulling up the email from Sam I'd received that morning. He only got half of it. The other half was meant to go to his mother, but there was a clerical error. The insurance company just released the funds this morning. I have access to the account details. Travis's eyes widened. How did you? While you were busy destroying our lives, I was actually trying to save them. I turned back to Victor's men. Tell him I want to meet. Just me. And tell him to bring proof of Travis's debts. All of them. The taller man made a call, speaking quietly into his phone. After a moment, he nodded. Victor will see you. Now. As we headed for the door, Lila called out, Evie? What are you going to do? I looked at Travis, seeing him clearly for the first time, not as the man I'd married, but as the stranger he'd become. I'm going to make sure everyone gets exactly what they deserve. The men led me to a waiting car, leaving Travis standing in the gallery doorway. His reflection fractured across the broken photograph still lying on the floor. In that moment, I realized revenge wasn't about hurting someone who hurt you. Sometimes, it was about making sure justice came in exactly the right form at exactly the right time. And I knew exactly what form Travis's justice needed to take. Victor's office was nothing like I'd imagined. No dark warehouse or smoky backroom, just a pristine suite in a downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He sat behind a glass desk, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Mrs. Parker, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I appreciate punctuality in business matters. I placed Sam's legal documents on the desk. Let's talk about Travis's debt. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Your husband owes me $200,000. The terms were clear. Show me. He slid a leather folder across the desk. Inside were promissory notes, each signed in Travis's familiar scrawl. The dates aligned perfectly with our missing savings, the withdrawn inheritance, the gallery payments to Lila. And the interest? I asked. Compounds daily. Currently at 40%. My hands clenched in my lap. That's illegal. So is gambling in my establishment. Yet here we are. Victor leaned forward. I understand you have access to the remaining insurance money? I do. But I have conditions. His eyebrow raised slightly. You're not in a position to negotiate, Mrs. Parker. Actually, I am. I pulled out my phone, showing him the email from Sam. This money legally belongs to Maggie Mitchell. One call from me, and she'll know everything, the gambling, the debt, the threats. How do you think it'll look when a grieving widow goes to the police about loan sharks threatening her son? Victor's smile vanished. You're playing a dangerous game. No, I'm ending one. I met his gaze steadily. Here's my offer, I'll transfer the insurance money, all $150,000. In exchange, you'll sign a document stating Travis's debt is paid in full. And you'll never contact him again. That's less than what he owes. It's more than you'll get if I walk out that door. The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. Finally, Victor nodded to one of his men, who produced a document. Sign here, Victor said. The money first, then I sign. My hand shook as I made the transfer. When it was done, Victor signed the release with a flourish. A pleasure doing business, he said. Though I'm curious, why save him? After everything he's done? I'm not saving him, I replied, standing. I'm making sure he faces the right consequences. Outside, Travis was waiting by the car, pacing nervously. Evie? What happened? Are we okay? I handed him the signed release. The debt's paid. You're free. His shoulders sagged with relief. Thank God. Baby, I promise I'll make this up to you. We can start fresh. No, Travis. We can't. He froze. What do you mean? I mean, I just used your mother's inheritance to save your life. Money that was meant to support her after losing your father. I stepped back as he reached for me. The gallery's pressing charges for fraud. Lila's lawyer will be contacting you about the stolen funds. And I've already filed for divorce. Evie, please. You have two choices, I cut him off. Either you check into rehab today, right now, or I call your mother and tell her everything. How you gambled away her husband's insurance money. How you stole from a grieving artist. How you nearly got us both killed. Travis's face crumpled. I need help, he whispered. I know. I pulled out one last piece of paper, the admission form for a treatment center. That's why I already made the arrangements. Will you? He swallowed hard. Will you wait for me? I thought about all the nights I'd waited for him, not knowing he was gambling away our future. About Lila, waiting in her gallery for a man who'd never really existed. About Maggie, still waiting for her son to become the man his father had been. No, I said softly. But maybe someday, you'll be someone worth waiting for. I watched as Victor's men escorted Travis to another car, heading for the treatment center. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam, papers filed. You okay? I looked at our reflection in the building's mirrored surface, Travis disappearing into the car, me standing alone in the afternoon sun. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. No, I texted back. But I will be. 3 weeks after Travis entered rehab, Maggie showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood in my doorway, clutching her handbag like a shield, looking older than I'd ever seen her. Were you ever going to tell me? Her voice trembled. About what Travis did with Robert's money. I stepped aside to let her in. How did you find out? The insurance company called about some paperwork. She sank onto my couch. I started asking questions. Then I spoke to Lila. Her eyes met mine. That poor girl. How could he? The kettle whistled in the kitchen, giving me a moment to collect myself. When I returned with 2 cups of tea, Maggie had pulled out a stack of letters. He's been writing to me from the facility, she said. Trying to explain. But I need to hear it from you, Evie. All of it. So I told her everything, the gambling, the lies, the debt to Victor. With each revelation, her hands gripped the letters tighter, knuckles white against the paper. I should have seen it, she whispered. The signs were all there, just like with his father. I nearly dropped my cup. What? Why do you think Robert had such a large life insurance policy? Her laugh was bitter. He got it after his first stint in rehab, 20 years ago. Said it was to protect us if he relapsed. The pieces clicked into place, Travis's secrecy, his father's sudden heart attack last year. The way Maggie had insisted on handling all the funeral arrangements alone. Did Travis know? About his father? No. Robert made me promise never to tell him. He was afraid Travis would. She closed her eyes. Would follow the same path. My phone buzzed, a text from the rehab facility, Travis Mitchell requesting immediate family visit. Urgent. Maggie saw the message over my shoulder. We should go together. The facility was an hour outside the city. During the drive, Maggie told me more about Robert, his struggles, his recoveries. His final relapse that led to that fatal night at a casino in Vegas. By the time we arrived, I felt the weight of 2 generations of addiction pressing down on us. Travis was waiting in the visitor's room, wearing facility-issued sweats that made him look somehow younger and older at the same time. When he saw Maggie, his face crumpled. Mom? What are you doing here? She stepped forward. Learning that my son is more like his father than I ever wanted him to be. Travis went pale. What do you mean? The gambling, Travis. The lies. Your father. She took a shaky breath. Your father died chasing one last win. Just like you almost did. He collapsed into a chair, hands shaking. Dad was. Like me? No, Maggie's voice hardened. You are like him. And I won't watch another Mitchell man destroy himself and everyone around him. I'm getting help, Travis protested. I'm trying to change. Are you? I cut in. Or are you just trying to win me back? Like another game you think you can play? Evie, please. Mom. He looked between us desperately. I know I messed up. But I'm doing the work. I'm facing everything I've done. Then face this, Maggie pulled out one last letter, not from the stack Travis had sent, but an older one, yellowed with age. Your father wrote this before he died. I think it's time you read it. Travis took the letter with trembling hands. As he read, tears began rolling down his face. When he finished, he looked up at his mother with new understanding. He was trying to win back what he lost, Travis whispered. Just like I was. The difference is, Maggie said softly, you still have a chance to choose a different ending. I watched them embrace, mother and son united in grief and hope. In that moment, I realized that sometimes the greatest act of revenge isn't about making someone suffer, it's about forcing them to face the truth. No matter how painful that truth might be. As I turned to leave, Travis called out, Evie, wait. There's something else you need to know. 6 months after Travis entered rehab, I sat in Lila's gallery, surrounded by her new exhibition. The walls were covered with photographs, not Travis's this time, but her own. Images of broken things made beautiful, shattered mirrors, cracked pottery filled with gold, weathered buildings reclaimed by nature. It's called restoration, Lila said, handing me a glass of wine. Sometimes things have to break completely before they can be rebuilt. I studied a particularly striking image of a wedding ring half buried in sand. Is that the one Travis gave me? Yes. She smiled without bitterness. I almost threw it into the ocean, but then I thought, why waste good art material? The gallery door chimed. Maggie entered, followed by Travis. He looked different, thinner, but somehow more substantial. Real. His eyes met mine briefly before focusing on the photographs. These are incredible, Lila, he said softly. Thank you. She straightened her shoulders. The proceeds are going to a gambling addiction support center. Seemed fitting. Travis nodded, then pulled an envelope from his jacket. I've been working with my counselor on making amends. This is the first installment to repay what I took from the gallery. Lila took the envelope without opening it. Keep it. Fund someone else's recovery instead. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, she agreed. But you have it anyway. That's how healing works. As Lila led Maggie through the exhibition, Travis turned to me. I found a job. Teaching photography at the community center. It's not much, but it's honest work. I heard, I said. Sam told me you're also volunteering at the addiction hotline. 3 nights a week. He hesitated. I got my 90-day chip yesterday. Congratulations. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, Travis pulled out another envelope, this one worn, like it had been carried for weeks. I wrote this during my 4th week in rehab, he said. After I read my dad's letter. I've rewritten it dozens of times, but... well, you should just read it. I opened the envelope slowly, aware of his eyes on me as I unfolded the pages. Dear Evie, it began. I used to think rock bottom was losing all our money, or facing Victor, or watching you walk away. But real rock bottom was realizing that I'd become my father's son in all the wrong ways. While ignoring the one lesson he tried to teach me through his death, that love isn't about winning or losing, it's about choosing, every day, to be worthy of it. The letter continued, detailing his struggles, his shame, his gradual understanding of the damage he'd caused. But it was the final paragraph that made my hands shake. I'm not asking you to take me back. I'm not even asking for forgiveness. I'm writing to tell you that you were right about everything. Your revenge wasn't making me pay the money back or forcing me into rehab. Your revenge was making me face myself, completely and honestly, for the first time in my life. And for that, I will always be grateful. I folded the letter carefully, aware of the weight of everything unsaid between us. The divorce papers are final next week, I said quietly. I know. Travis smiled sadly. You know what's strange? For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to win anything back. I'm just trying to be better. Across the gallery, Lila was showing Maggie a photograph of a broken clock, its gears scattered but glinting with possibility. The late afternoon sun caught the image, casting fractured light across the floor between Travis and me. Maybe that's the real difference between you and your father, I said. You're learning to live with the pieces, instead of trying to gamble them back together. Travis nodded, understanding in his eyes. As I turned to leave, he called out one last time. Evie? Thank you. For making me fold when you did. I paused at the door, looking back at the exhibition title, Restoration. Sometimes, I said, losing everything is the only way to find out what's worth keeping. Outside, the city was painted in sunset colors, broken and beautiful and full of possibilities. I walked toward it, leaving the gallery and Travis behind, knowing that some things need to stay broken to remind us why we choose to heal.
Even if you receive welfare, you're still poor. With those words, the two left the house. I lost all my strength and slumped down, sitting weakly. I remembered what Phil had said earlier.
Sure, Ashley, you're independent, but I've always felt my pride as a man being hurt. From now on, I want to build a family with your sister, with Lindsay. So, please divorce me.
I felt like nothing mattered anymore, so I went ahead and signed the divorce papers to make it clear that I wanted out. After some time, I decided to discuss compensation with the two of them, with a lawyer present. Shamelessly, my sister, who's not even related by blood, demanded a share of the assets. However, the lawyer burst out laughing and said, "Aren't you the one on welfare?" What? My sister was surprised and shouted out loud because she didn't see it coming. Right after that, when the lawyer placed the documents on the table, my sister's face turned pale. My name is Ashley Reed. My husband Phil and I have been married for 18 years. I am 45 years old, and Phil is 3 years younger at 42. We have a daughter, Rita, who is 17 years old and currently a high school sophomore. She's going to be taking those crucial exams next year to get into college. Phil and I met through work. I was working at a real estate company and Phil was working at a related company. We hit it off over something trivial and started going out privately frequently. Phil has a very delicate personality and often finds it hard to make decisions decisively. Back then, I found his indecisive nature cute and was attracted to him. I wanted to take care of him in various ways. I genuinely felt that way. Also, I have a younger brother who is much younger than me. Initially, I was looking after Phil, projecting my brother onto him, but gradually I became attracted to his manly qualities, and we seriously started dating and got married. Usually indecisive, Phil took the initiative for both the confession and the proposal. In situations that needed decisions, he made them decisively. That gap made me feel that I could safely marry him. Then we had Rita without ever having a serious argument or a marital crisis. Once Rita became an adult, we planned to start a second life as a couple. Well, that's what I thought. "Hey, Ashley, can I stay here for a bit?" Saying that, my sister Lindsay, who had come for an unannounced visit, pulling a large suitcase, arrived. I have a sister besides my brother, and that's the sister standing in front of me. Maybe because of the age difference, I get along well with my brother. However, my sister, who is close in age to me, and I have always had a difficult relationship. Being shorter than my sister, I always ended up with her hand-me-downs. Feeling sorry for me, our parents would buy me a new toy. "Wow, nice! Give me one too!" Saying that, my sister snatched the new doll I had received and pushed her worn-out, broken doll onto me. Her outrageous behavior did not stop there. As cute as taking things might be, it was still bearable. When we started elementary school, she stole all the friends I was close to, and when I got my first boyfriend in high school, she seduced him away from me. Even though I went to different schools to get away from her, she still butted in, and I couldn't have a good time in college. I still don't really like my sister. If possible, I want nothing to do with her. So I studied hard, obtained my real estate license, moved to LA, and lived a life without seeing my sister. Phil and I decided to have a photo wedding just for the two of us. Knowing my sister's personality, my parents kept my marriage a secret. Yet she found out I was here. I was hoping that once Rita started university, I would have some time for myself and my husband.
Huh? Actually, you live in a pretty nice house for your taste. Is it a detached house? Oh, there's a room available here. I'll use this one.
My sister's shrill scream snapped me back to reality. Hey, you can't just come out of the blue like this. Why are you even here? There's no way you can stay when my husband and daughter are living here too, right? Ignoring my words, my sister started looking around the house. Today is a holiday, but Rita is out attending a summer course. Phil had also been out since morning due to work. Could you please leave before the two of them come back? I asked her repeatedly, but my sister did not listen. Finally, in the evening, the two of them returned home.
Who might you be?
Phil looked puzzled, but my sister greeted him with such charm that you wouldn't guess she's 46.
Nice to meet you. I'm Ashley's sister, Lindsay. When did you marry her? I had no idea because there was no greeting or announcement about your wedding. I was bored, so I went to visit our mom's house and I found a photo from your wedding in her room. She's so secretive, even though we're sisters.
Phil knew I had a sister, so I think he saw her the way I told him, and he seemed a bit concerned. But I definitely noticed it. Phil checking out my gorgeous sister. Rita also returned home with a puzzled look on her face. It's only natural she'd have that look on her face. Suddenly, an aunt she had never met before had barged into our house. But my sister was super determined to talk about us living together.
Ashley, I got fired, and it's tough to manage the rent and living expenses, so I'd like to stay here for a bit.
Well, if it's just for a little while, why not?
What? Not right now. Rita has important exams next year. I was about to say that, but the two of them didn't listen to me and were getting excited on their own.
Actually, I've heard about you from Ashley.
It's fine. Ashley was avoiding me, so you just went along with what she described about me, right? I'm sorry my sister said those things about me to you.
Since then, it's been non-stop chaos every day. My sister didn't do any housework, but kept asking for money, and eventually she even started stealing cash from my wallet. This happened just 1 week after my sister moved in. I had repeatedly warned her about this, but she did not listen. Hey, if you need money, at least tell me what you're buying or why you need it. Don't just take it from my wallet.
Huh? Why should I report to you what I'm buying?
Because it's my money. Since she was fired, I wished she would job hunt and quickly move out. However, it didn't seem like she was job hunting. Recently, the times Phil and Lindsay were out seemed to overlap. Phil had said he was working overtime, but there was never any overtime pay included in his salary. I complained about this. Your salary doesn't include overtime pay, right? Then you must properly receive overtime pay. If you can't say it, shall I say it for you?
What? Are you doubting me? I do receive the overtime pay separately, so there's no problem.
Usually gentle, Phil had never raised his voice before. This was enough of a shock for me. Because Phil was not someone who would suddenly shout or blame emotionally. From this point, I started to feel a crisis in our current life. My sister continued to lounge around at home, costing us more and more money. She was consuming more than my daughter Rita, and I could only sigh. I discussed this with our parents. They apologized for their lack of oversight, which led to my sister finding out about my marriage and current home. But it was not our parents' fault. I had been living quietly away from my dear parents, with my husband and daughter, yet my sister was obsessed enough to track me down. She must have been preparing to find out where I lived when she found our wedding photo. Surely even now she is planning to take my things and make me unhappy. I started to doubt whether Lindsay really got fired from her job. Maybe she quit on purpose to disrupt my life. It even began to seem like a possibility. If that was the case, I needed to kick her out of the house as soon as possible. You said you got fired, but if you were enrolled in employment insurance, wouldn't you be eligible for unemployment benefits?
I've always been part-time, so I wasn't enrolled in that kind of stuff. That's why I'm struggling. I could have gone back to our parents' house, but I can't just make my elderly parents take care of me, right? So as an independent adult, it's your responsibility as a sister to take care of me. That's common sense.
I was at a loss for words to her nonsensical response. After dropping out of university, Lindsay had always worked part-time and apparently never had a full-time job. Being confronted with this fact later, I felt it was no wonder her job hunting wasn't going well. 3 months after Lindsay started staying with us, I finally caught her and Phil in the act of cheating. I had suspected it before, but now it was confirmed. One day when a client canceled a meeting, I went to a cafe to pass the time and saw Lindsay and Phil walking together outside. They were holding hands and chatting happily. It's unthinkable for just a brother-in-law and sister-in-law to be holding hands. At that moment, I was certain they were having an affair. After a while, when I had made up my mind, I confronted them at home. So the overtime was a lie after all. Lindsay, you've just been pretending to job hunt while hanging out with Phil. Ugh, the worst. Even at this age, you can't be satisfied without taking something from me? That's why I've always kept the fact that I was married from you. Exploding with emotion as I spoke my mind forcefully, the two of them readily admitted to their affair. Then they started saying things that were even more upsetting.
If I had known such a beautiful person was your sister, I wouldn't have been misled by you to avoid Lindsay. Ashley, you're indeed independent, but I've always felt like my pride as a man was being hurt. From now on, I want to build a family with your sister, with Lindsay. So please, divorce me.
He then presented me with a divorce paper that was already filled out in his section. Understood. There's no way to rebuild this anymore. Lindsay, Phil, from now on, I won't be looking after any of your financial needs, so just know that. After I said that, Lindsay burst out laughing and said this.
Even if you receive welfare, you're still poor.
What? Wondering what she was talking about, a half-smiling Phil began to say even more absurd things.
Right. Since custody usually favors the mother, I think it's better for Ashley to be with our daughter. Just do as you like from here.
With those words, the two of them left the house. A few minutes later, Rita came home and was puzzled by how quiet the house had become, so I honestly told her that we were getting a divorce. Initially shocked, Rita seemed somewhat relieved to accept the situation. Sometime later, the divorce was finalized. I decided to discuss compensation with them with a lawyer present. Shamelessly, Lindsay demanded a share of the assets. However, the lawyer burst out laughing and said, Aren't you the one on welfare?
What?
Caught off guard by the sudden turn of events, my sister made a startled outcry. Right after that, my sister turned pale when she saw the documents the lawyer had placed on the table.
There isn't enough money between this couple to divide any assets.
Shocked by those words, Lindsay looked back and forth between Phil and me. Of course, Phil was also surprised to hear that we almost had no assets. Anticipating this, I had taken certain actions right after witnessing Phil and Lindsay cheating. Therefore, between us, the couple, we only had a mere $12,000 in cash. For a couple that had been married for 18 years, this was hardly a believable amount.
Hey, what's going on? You had a lot of savings, didn't you?
Phil, completely unable to grasp what was happening, asked this in a panic. Watching him, I felt anger well up inside me. You really have no interest in Rita at all. Didn't we talk about this? I've been saving up for her education, but I thought I'd transfer it to her account now. You said to do as I like, so I transferred the money I had saved to Rita's account. Almost all of my savings are for education. You know this better than anyone, right? Rita is managing her money herself, and I even paid the gift tax to transfer it to her, so this is no longer considered a couple's savings. I mentioned it with a calm face, and Phil's complexion started to pale as he remembered the conversation.
So, what makes up the $12,000?
About 80% of it is what I think Phil has been hiding. At this, Phil looked at me as if wondering how I knew.
You knew about it, and that's why you transferred your savings to Rita, considering the division of assets?
You agreed to it. Remember, you signed the consent form yourself. With that, Phil became angry.
I thought it was strange. Why would you ask for my agreement just to do that?
Phil was visibly regretful as he scratched his head, but since he had signed it himself, he couldn't claim it back now. The lawyer had confirmed that since Phil had consented to the gift to Rita, it was no longer considered marital savings at that point. I didn't want the money I had been saving for Rita all this time to go to these two. That's why it considered a living trust. Hearing this, Lindsay looked stunned, but somehow managed to say to Phil,
Hey, you said we had plenty of savings. Weren't we supposed to live a luxurious life together? Dividing $12,000 won't amount to much, will it? Why didn't you realize Ashley's intentions sooner?
While turning pale, Lindsay blamed Phil, but Phil just looked away and kept silent. Phil had been earning little and had a lot of student loans, so he hadn't contributed much to living expenses for a while after we got married. However, this was under agreement. When Phil had discussed the difficulty of contributing to the living expenses, I had said, Understood. I'll handle all the living expenses, so could you please focus on saving as much money as possible for our retirement? That's why I had been covering all the living expenses for many years. I thought Phil had been able to save at least $1,000 a month, but when it came down to it, it was less than $10,000. He didn't have to pay living expenses, so saving should have been easy, but Phil had been wastefully spending without my knowledge. That must be it. I had accidentally seen his bank book left on his desk and discovered the savings amount, feeling betrayed. But perhaps he had been saving properly in another account. That faint hope was also betrayed, but now that we were divorced, it didn't matter anymore. Lindsay was finally understanding the gravity of the situation and was visibly shaken, desperately trying to think of what to do next, but apparently coming up with nothing. Knowing that the cash available for division was only $12,000 and seeing Lindsay confused, I decided to tell her more of the truth. I looked at Phil and said, I debated whether to say this, but Phil, you're planning to quit your job, aren't you? Then Phil, who had been avoiding eye contact and keeping silent, suddenly met my gaze. Visibly flustered, Phil moved his eyes left and right as he shouted,
How do you know I'm planning to quit my job? I haven't told anyone but the boss yet.
I thought so when I saw the details. What I pointed out was the fact that no overtime pay was being paid, but I had actually been wondering about a particular section. It was about the use of paid leave. Phil had quit a job related to real estate before and was now working for a construction company, but I had never seen him take more than the minimum 5 days of paid leave. Yet recently I noticed in the payroll statements that Phil's paid leave was being consumed all at once. When you think of using up paid leave all at once, resignation comes to mind. And since then, I had been suspecting their affair, wondering if Phil had decided to quit his job thinking he would get a substantial fortune after divorcing me. I couldn't help but sigh at Phil's overly optimistic thinking that this might actually happen. Well, you were my husband after all, so you should know what kind of work I do and how much wealth I've accumulated. To think you cheat and even choose to quit your job based on that? You really don't think ahead, do you? As I said this, Phil's face turned red. The lawyer's remark to Lindsay about being on welfare meant that the two of them being unemployed together would end up in that situation unless they worked. Lindsay seemed panicked by this further truth, but then she seemed to realize something and exclaimed,
Wait a minute. If you alone can cover Rita's college expenses and living costs, there must be something fishy going on. Got it. You're hiding assets, aren't you? That must be it. Come on, confess already.
Hearing my sister's words, Phil seemed to have a realization as well.
That's right. Lindsay, actually, Ashley owns a lot of real estate, and we need to divide that as assets. Close call. Almost got tricked. Real estate is a significant asset, and we need to split it evenly between us. You've been acting all high and mighty, but you're being sneaky and cheap too.
Watching the two of them laugh about this, I was dumbfounded. Eventually, the lawyer couldn't hold back a chuckle. At that moment, the tension in the air tightened. The lawyer cleared her throat and began to explain the facts calmly.
If we're going to talk about dividing assets, perhaps you should study up first. Phil, as the former husband, you might know this, but Ashley owns the real estate through her company, which is making a profit. A corporation and an individual are separate entities. Ashley's company is her separate property, and it cannot be divided as marital assets.
Convinced by the professional's explanation, the two turned bright red and froze. The lawyer continued.
As for assets that can be considered, typical ones include cars, houses, and cash savings. Furthermore, Phil and Lindsay have practically admitted to the affair. Therefore, Ashley can demand compensation from you two. Let's say $10,000 from Phil and $3,000 from Lindsay.
At those words, their faces contorted.
What? Isn't that high? It was just a few months' relationship.
Yeah. Hey, isn't this normally not even close to $10,000?
The two began making excuses, apparently not expecting this turn of events. However, I promptly rebutted. Oh, who decided that? The market rate is just a guide. Phil, you took paid leave to secretly date my sister, and Lindsay, you didn't even seriously look for a job, but just spent my money frolicking around. The lawyer objectively assessed these facts and settled on these amounts. What? Would you have preferred a higher amount? With that, the two hastily shook their heads. The discussion didn't conclude that day and was adjourned, but I felt a firm reassurance about the situation. 2 weeks later, we met again to discuss. Strangely, Lindsay adopted a defiant attitude and said,
Give me the house and the standard car. Is that what you call compensation like asset division? Then give Phil $12,000 and I'll pay the remaining $1,000 with that, okay?
Her ludicrous statement almost drove me to shout in anger, but I managed to control myself with reason and slowly sorted out the situation. There was still a mortgage on the house and I had maintained it whenever necessary, so it would probably fetch a decent price if sold. The car, too, was still relatively new, having been bought only 5 years ago. Accepting my sister's terms would mean a loss for me, which I absolutely did not want. Lindsay, did you even do the math? If you consider the money from selling the house and car, you wouldn't say such things, right? Normally, those kinds of discussions aren't for the cheating party like you and Phil to initiate. It's for me to bring up. I couldn't believe how brazen they were. Before I could continue, Phil, sitting next to Lindsay, interrupted with this.
You own assets worth $170 million through your company, right? I don't care if they call you the queen of real estate or whatever, but being so stingy with money despite having such wealth is just too crazy.
Stunned for a moment, I ended up laughing out loud at their ridiculous claims. Given the situation, my sudden laughter froze them. After a good laugh, I returned to a serious expression. So that's all you wanted to say? And why are you playing the victim? Greedy? I'm fine being called greedy. I'd rather keep the money for Rita than give it to a man who would abandon his daughter and a terrible sister who would steal her brother-in-law. They both flinched. As the lawyer said during the previous discussion, if you want to use legal terms, you really should study more. What made them think they could say such a thing? I decided to slowly dismantle their plans. Phil, the house is registered in my name, right?
I know that, but we've been living together all this time.
So what? I bought it on a mortgage before we got married, so no matter what, it remains my separate property. The car was bought new. It's accident-free and violation-free, and this model sells for a good price, so if you want to take it, you need to pay me half the appraisal value. That's the rule for property division. We own 2 cars. One is a new car we've been discussing. The other is a used compact car, which probably won't fetch much.
But the lawyer said that houses and cars are subject to property division.
Without thinking, my sister took those words at face value. However, that's not what it meant. Look, the lawyer was just telling the main items that could be included in property division, not saying they would definitely be included this time. What we need to divide between us is just a combined $12,000 from Phil's hidden savings and my savings, plus the 2 cars. That's all. Unaware of this, and with Phil not having thought deeply about it, they found themselves in a bind again. Phil seemed to ponder over various things, but eventually, not knowing what to do, he pleaded with me.
So, could you just give me enough money to start a new life, please?
But he didn't seem remorseful. It just seemed like he was apologizing to solve the problem at hand. I don't need such a shallow apology. I hardened my heart and responded. Given how you are, it seems like you wouldn't want to pay child support for Rita either. So there's no room for compromise, is there? Why should I worry about your living expenses? After I firmly stated this, they realized that no matter what they said, I wouldn't budge, and they reluctantly signed the relevant documents. Sometime after the divorce and the division of assets were settled, I kept getting calls from my sister.
Hey, why did Phil have so much debt? You were paying the living expenses, right? Then what was the point of getting into debt? What's going on?
She was screaming over the phone. While holding back a sigh, I calmly explained the facts. It's obvious, isn't it? The fact that he had less than $10,000 saved up, despite having years to do so, should have told you everything. Does it mean he was making big purchases or had set up car loans? Something like that? When I asked in exasperation, my sister desperately explained her current situation.
Yes, exactly. He took out loans worth several thousands just to pay meaningless luxury brands. And then the credit card payments turned into a nightmare because they were set to revolving credit without knowing. When we looked into it, this guy was just a dangerous debtor. How could you saddle me with such a person?
Well, you didn't get saddled with him. You stole him from me. I retorted with a half smile, and my sister fell silent. It seems Phil has been incurring debts even without my knowledge. Now I'm getting several collection letters. He had hidden it while we were together, but probably let his guard down after changing addresses. Or, maybe being Phil, he got too caught up in his new life and forgot to hide it. Oh, there's one more thing I didn't tell you, Lindsay.
What now?
She was completely terrified, but I had remembered something upon hearing about the debts. Phil mentioned he was in construction, but it's really just his own one-man show. There, they withhold income tax and resident tax, but he needs to manage all other necessary payments himself. I run my own business, so I handle national pension and national health insurance myself, and when Phil quit his job in real estate, I also switched Rita to national health insurance to manage it. I had been handling my own resident tax and other matters, but it turned out that Phil had not been paying his national pension since a year ago when he changed jobs. I was handling the national health insurance payments, so that was not an issue. Due to some mistake, we received a dunning letter for the national pension at our house. I contacted Phil to get permission to open it, and it turned out to be a dunning letter. It seems he had been hiding it all along because I had no idea. I pay my own national pension, and I assumed Phil was paying his too. When I called Phil to ask if I could open the dunning letter, he begged for help, almost in tears.
National pension costs this much? No way, man. I can't pay this. We were a family, weren't we? Help me out, will ya?
Huh? What are you talking about? Are those the words of the very person who abandoned his wife and child? Once again, my logic left Phil speechless. Talking about this made him realize there was no hope, and it seemed like my sister, on the other end of the phone, had also lost her words out of despair. That's the situation, so you'll have to figure it out yourselves. With that, I hung up the phone. Eventually, Phil called back, complaining about the high taxes on the car he took and that he hadn't expected the vehicle inspection to be so costly.
Man, maintaining a car costs this much? I was shocked. I thought the taxes would be a few $10, but it was in the hundreds. And the car inspection costs this much too? It's tough, huh? Won't you take it back?
No. After my brief response, Phil hung up, disappointed. Subsequently, he sent emails begging for help, but when I warned him, if you keep this up, I'll consider it stalking and consult the police, he stopped immediately. From now on, an even tougher hell awaits the two of them. Later, it seems that Phil and Lindsay got divorced. Their marriage lasted only 3 months after he divorced me. The plan probably went awry when they realized the single-family home registered in my name was not subject to property division. Getting married while carrying debts and compensation in the tens of thousands was never going to work out. Moreover, it seems their post-divorce squabbles were even worse than when he was with me. Lindsay is someone who clings to money.
Sell the new car. Keeping it is a waste. Better to turn it into cash, right?
What? The small change doesn't matter. Besides, I paid all of your compensation, so if we're divorcing, give me that money back.
Such trivial quarrels apparently delayed their divorce. Eventually, they did divorce, but Phil seems to have chosen the path of bankruptcy. Since I had already collected the lump sum compensation payment, it didn't affect me. However, now Phil was unemployed, penniless, and ultimately became homeless. Of course, having said he would quit his job, he couldn't take back his words and left the company. His unnecessary pride prevented him from applying for welfare. Now he's probably living a miserable life, begging like a beggar. Divine retribution has struck Lindsay. Despite stealing her sister's husband and cheating, she was divorced after only 3 months, a fact that became well known around her, ruining her social relationships. Naturally, her family and relatives disowned her. Also, no company would want to hire someone like my sister, so her job search remains difficult. Even if she gets hired for a part-time job, her terrible attitude of never being wrong leads to her being fired in an instant. The lawyer's words about being eligible for welfare became reality, and now Lindsay is persistently at the welfare office trying to get support. However, because she continues to hold on to any potentially valuable personal belongings, she hasn't been able to receive welfare and got kicked out of her apartment, ending up homeless like Phil. Since she trampled on my and Rita's feelings with her selfish actions, this punishment seems only fair. Now it's just the two of us living, and our days are unremarkably peaceful. Rita, who used to receive nothing but complaints about studying and going to a good university from Phil, says she felt relieved after he was gone, and she brilliantly passed her exams and got into a national university. Watching my daughter start university this spring, I am once again moved. My work is busily rewarding, and although I'll soon be 46, I am still healthy. I think to myself that I must keep going even harder.
I sold it for $400,000, so I'm going abroad on a trip with my lover. Hearing Nick's unusually cheerful voice, I instinctively asked, "What?" He called during his hospital stay and said, "I sold the house for $400,000. I thought, what does that mean? That house was the precious one I took over from my father. And to openly declare having a lover, that's insane." "What do you mean?" "You sold the house, but what about Sarah?" When I mentioned our daughter's name, Nick scoffed and said, "Humph. That brat. I've always found her annoying. She has an attitude of making light of grown-ups. Of course, I'm leaving her behind." What a thing to say about his own daughter. I felt like I was going crazy with anger and shock at him declaring he sold our house and was fleeing with his lover. Somehow I must stop Nick. Even if he says he sold the house, it can't be handed over that quickly. I must stop him somehow. My name is Angela Hansen. I'm a 39-year-old homemaker. I wish I could say I live happily with my husband, Nick, 1 year older than me, and our 9-year-old daughter, Sarah, but that's far from the truth with Nick. Since we got married, his personality has gradually twisted. And I suspect he has been cheating for about a year now. I have no proof, so I haven't been able to do anything. But Nick hasn't been trying very hard to hide his infidelity. Nick works at an auto parts factory and goes out drinking somewhere 4 or 5 days a week after work. While it could be with his coworkers, he didn't go out nearly as often until a year ago. Moreover, when he comes home, I can smell a unique perfume on him. And he has been preparing expensive bags and shoes that I've never seen before. Of course, he doesn't give them to me, and he just takes the presents and goes out. I'm too scared to confront him about his cheating. So I haven't been able to take any action until I have proof. The Nick I first met seems like a completely different person. Nick and I met 10 years ago, and after dating for a year, we got married. I was attracted to his kind and gentlemanly demeanor, and before I knew it, I had fallen in love. He proposed to me on our 1-year dating anniversary, and we registered our marriage. And soon our daughter Sarah was born. From the outside, it seemed like a very happy marriage. Yet why has it come to this? It all started when Sarah was about 1 year old. As she turned 1 and became more active, moving around and rummaging through things in the house, parenting became even more challenging. I was a full-time homemaker and took care of her all day. But sometimes I couldn't manage alone, and I started asking Nick, who was tired from work, to help with baths and meals. At first, perhaps because he had a sense of being a father. He cooperated with the childcare as I asked, but as it continued every day, he gradually began to dislike it and stopped wanting to be involved. I've been thinking this, but this is your job, right? You're a stay-at-home mom, so you should be able to handle the childcare alone. Why does a tired me have to help you? After exploding with complaints, Nick threw those harsh words at me and went to the bedroom alone, leaving me and Sarah in the living room. Sarah, who was in her defiant phase and crying and fussing about putting on pajamas, was hard to calm down, and his words stabbed me in the heart. After that, Nick stopped interacting with Sarah altogether. Even on his days off, when Sarah would ask him, "Daddy, play with me," Nick would respond while reading a gambling magazine. Playing is mommy's job. I'm busy right now. He didn't listen to her feelings at all. When Sarah cried during her defiant phase, Nick would snap, glaring at Sarah and me alternately. Hey, don't cry over something like this. Angela, what kind of parenting are you doing? A stay-at-home mom who can't even handle childcare is useless. I didn't want Sarah to hear her father's verbal abuse, so I returned to the room with her. And we had no choice but to play together. Even I had moments when I wanted to enjoy my hobbies, like reading books and watching movies. But living with my daughter glued to me, I had virtually no time for myself. And yet, Nick was enjoying his hobby of gambling, while I had to endure his verbal abuse, which was unfair. But since our household was supported by his earnings, I couldn't complain. If Nick wasn't there, I wouldn't be able to feed Sarah by myself. I was also angry with myself for being so helpless. That's why Nick lived as he pleased, uninterested in parenting. It's been 8 years since then, and Sarah is now 9 years old. Nick's verbal abuse hasn't stopped. And the kind Nick from before our marriage is nowhere to be seen. I lived with Nick just to support Sarah, trying as much as possible not to provoke him. Mom, you're good at drawing, so you should get a job doing that. One day, while Sarah and I were drawing together, she suddenly said that. Oh, a job drawing?
Yeah.
Because Mom's drawings are gentle and really wonderful. She laughed cheerfully as she looked at the animal illustrations I had drawn. I've always loved drawing, and I once aimed to be a cartoon artist. I realized partway through that the path to becoming a cartoon artist was impossible and gave up. But I still draw illustrations as a hobby. I always show your drawings to Megan and Kristen, and they say they're amazing. They're envious of having a mom who can draw such pictures. Despite her father, Nick, being twisted, Sarah grew up honest and straightforward. She's cheerful and the complete opposite of my gloomy self. She seems to have many friends at school and is favored by her teachers. Feeling proud that Sarah appreciated my drawings gave me confidence. Thank you. I'm happy to hear that. As I said that, she smiled like a flower blooming. If she smiles, I feel like I can keep enduring this life. I thought quietly to myself. That night, as usual, Nick came home drunk and collapsed in the living room the moment he returned. Completely intoxicated. His drinking habits have become a serious concern recently. I sighed as I took his jacket off him where he lay and checked his pockets. What is this? Usually, his pockets would contain nothing more than keys. But this time, a piece of paper fell out, and I stared at it intently. It was clearly a receipt with the name of a hotel written on it. This is definitely proof. Until now, I had only vaguely suspected infidelity, but here was physical evidence. I managed to calm my fluttering heart and quietly placed the receipt on the shelf. Then, I started thinking about how to confront Nick. The next day, with half the alcohol still in his system, Nick left the house. Sarah went off to school, and I did my usual household chores. But I couldn't get the receipt from yesterday out of my mind. I had been vaguely aware that Nick was cheating, and not confronting him was my choice. However, now that concrete evidence had come out, it was difficult to continue our life as if everything was fine, pretending to be a good couple. Within a week, or maybe even a few days, I wanted to make him admit to his infidelity and apologize. For that, I wondered what to do. As I was lost in thought, my phone vibrated. Who could it be at this time? It was rare to receive a call during the day. I looked at my phone and saw an unknown number. A sense of foreboding washed over me as I answered the call. Hello, is this Mr. Nick Hansen's residence? Yes, it is. Who am I speaking with? This is Central General Hospital. I'm calling you about Mr. Hansen. The call was from the biggest general hospital around. They informed me that Nick had been brought in by ambulance and was undergoing surgery for a kidney disease. They also mentioned that his kidneys were likely to fail and he would need a transplant. I was confused by the sudden news when the doctor asked, "Are you okay?" Yes. Can a kidney transplant be done? Yes. We will start looking for a donor immediately, and if we find one, we can proceed with the transplant surgery. I see. I was overwhelmed with information. But the doctor continued to explain the details about the transplant surgery. We will check the compatibility with potential candidates, so please be prepared. I only understood about half of what the doctor said. But it was clear that Nick was in a serious condition due to his illness. No matter how much he mocked me or cheated, I didn't want him to lose his life. I hoped he could be saved. That night, I spent all night thinking about his transplant surgery. Weeks passed, and we received the results of the kidney compatibility tests from potential candidates, basically family members. Surprisingly, I was the most compatible donor. His parents were still alive but in poor health and unable to undergo transplant surgery. Since Nick is an only child, and I was the healthiest and matched his blood type, I was the best candidate. If asked whether I had any hesitation, it would be a lie to say I didn't. However, nothing could replace his life. With that thought, I decided to become the donor for his kidney transplant surgery. I explained Nick's condition and the details of our transplant surgery to Sarah. And she cheerfully said, "I understand. Good luck." While I was hospitalized, Sarah would stay with her grandparents. Despite their poor health, they were mostly able to manage on their own at home. Sarah was happy to go to her grandparents' house because she got along well with them. This way, I can be at peace for a while. I was relieved that Sarah was such a well-behaved child. With that reassurance, I faced the transplant surgery. A week later, I signed the consent form, underwent health checks, and then underwent the kidney transplant surgery for Nick. The surgery was over more quickly than I had expected, and I stayed in the hospital for about a week, while Nick stayed for about 10 days. Fortunately, there were no complications, and the recovery went smoothly. The day before I was to be discharged, I received another call on my phone. Wondering who it could be this time, I answered to hear a familiar voice suddenly say, "It's me." The caller was none other than Nick. I thought he might thank me for being a donor and asked him, "It's been a while. How are you feeling after the surgery?" I had expected him to say something like, "I'm feeling better thanks to you, Angela." Thank you. However, the words that came through the phone were unexpected. About our house. Nick paused for a moment. As he suddenly brought up the house, I was taken aback. I sold it for $400,000, so I'm going abroad with my lover. Hearing his inappropriately cheerful voice, I instinctively asked, "What?" He called during his hospital stay and said, "I sold the house for $400,000. I thought, what does that mean? That house was the precious one I took over from my father. And to openly declare having a lover, that's insane. What do you mean? You sold the house, but what about Sarah? When I mentioned our daughter's name, Nick scoffed and said, "Humph. That brat. I've always found her annoying. She has an attitude of making light of grown-ups. Of course, I'm leaving her behind." What a thing to say about his own daughter. I felt like I was going crazy with anger and shock at him declaring he sold our house and was fleeing with his lover. Somehow I must stop Nick. Even if he says he sold the house, it can't be handed over that quickly. I must stop him somehow. After saying he sold the house and was going abroad with his lover, the call was abruptly cut off. I sat, bewildered, trying to make sense of what had happened. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't believe that Nick had suddenly sold our house, especially while we were hospitalized. Due to the shock, my condition worsened, and my hospital stay was extended. In my despair, I could do nothing but lie in bed alone, brooding over what would happen next. For now, I should call my daughter. If the house was gone, Sarah and I would have nowhere to return to. It was infuriating that Nick had boldly declared he had a lover. But what concerned me most was Sarah. I called my in-laws home, and my mother-in-law answered. She quickly handed the phone to Sarah. "Hello, Sarah? I'm sorry, it looks like my hospital stay has been extended. Are you okay? Are you feeling lonely? And I heard from your father that he sold our house. We've lost our place to return to." Worried about her, I fired questions rapidly. Then she replied cheerfully. "Mom, it's okay. I've taken care of it." What? I didn't understand what Sarah meant by she had taken care of it, and I was puzzled. Dad said he asked his lover to sell the house, but actually, Grandma and Grandpa. Sarah told me in detail about what had happened while I was hospitalized. I was astonished to hear that. Unexpected developments had unfolded without my knowledge. So Mom, just rest easy. I'm fine. Thank you. Encouraged by Sarah's responsible words, I was finally able to calm down a bit. However, if Sarah's story was true, I wondered what was happening now with Nick and his lover. I was curious, but I told myself that resting was more important and went to sleep. 3 days later, after I had fully recovered, I was discharged from the hospital and headed to my in-laws' house. "Mom, welcome back." Sarah ran towards me with a happy face. Behind her, my mother-in-law squinted her eyes with a smile. That Nick really did something outrageous. "I'm sorry, Angela." My father-in-law apologized to me with a stern face. With such wonderful parents, how could Nick have turned out so twisted? "No, it's my fault for not speaking up and just following along all this time. You don't need to apologize to me." "Thank you." "Actually, Angela, there's something I want to tell you." "Yes? What is it?" I sat down in front of my in-laws, and Sarah and I listened to what they had to say. Although their story surprised me again, my mother-in-law's strong encouragement that we won't let Nick have his way reassured me. Then, on our way home, I saw a familiar face and an unknown woman arguing embarrassingly with a real estate agent in front of an office. It was unmistakably Nick. And the woman with him had to be his lover. He was in a tracksuit with messy hair. And his lover was wearing a short skirt with one high heel and no makeup. "Hey, do something." "What do you mean the house isn't sold?" "Right. What about my $400,000? "Well, I can't do much. The buyer canceled the purchase last night, so the contract is now void." "What? Why cancel?" "Damn it." Nick stomped around, and his lover shrieked beside him, drawing startled looks from passers-by. Sarah and I were surprised too, but realizing it concerned us, we approached them. "What are you doing here?" Startled by my sudden appearance, Nick and his lover exclaimed in an absurd tone. "What are you doing here?" "Oh, I get it. You did this, didn't you? You must have persuaded the buyer not to go through with it." "What? That's unbelievable. This makes no sense." As they hurled foul words, I subtly shielded Sarah behind me. The real estate agent looked perplexed, so I stepped forward and said, "I'm his wife." The agent responded with a stunned "Oh. Are you mocking me with that cancellation?" "Because of you. We had to turn back right before boarding the plane. And now we can't buy a new house. I even have debts from the money I gave to her." He pointed at his lover. Now it all made sense. He had tried to sell the house I inherited from my late father to pay off the debts from the money he spent on his lover and to buy a new house for them to live in. How selfish. Ignoring Sarah's and my existence, he even tried to take away my most precious asset. Unbelievable. I was trembling with anger. "Excuse me, but aren't you the one being disrespectful? What are you doing showing up all of a sudden? You're talking back to me? You can't even eat properly without me." Despite the critical situation, Nick still spewed insults, but I continued. "First of all, do you really think you can sell my precious house without consulting me? I'm the owner of that house. Did you forge some documents? And you've been cursing the buyer. But the people who tried to buy the house were your parents." "What? What do you mean?" "Yes. What Sarah told me over the phone while I was hospitalized was that my in-laws pretended to buy my house as a strategy to punish him. My in-laws had heard all about Nick's misdeeds from Sarah and were furious, saying, 'It's unthinkable for him to do such things to Angela and our dear granddaughter.' Sarah's inherent brightness and honest nature had made my in-laws believe her story over their sons. Let me explain. Grandpa and Grandma knew about Dad and that woman. And they were really angry. I knew Dad was trying to sell the house and I talked to them about it. That house was left to Mom by her dad, and it's too important to just sell off like that. So before anyone else could buy it, Grandpa and Grandma tried to buy it on purpose." Sarah stepped forward and confidently explained the situation. "Those two, what are they doing to their own son? Damn old man and old lady. And you too. A kid sticking her nose in, showing how bad her mother's parenting is." Nick, desperate, let out a vulgar laugh. Sarah did not flinch at his attack. I pulled a piece of paper from my bag and thrust it in front of his nose. "Sorry, but I'm divorcing you." Seeing the divorce papers, Nick laughed through his nose again. "Divorce? You said it? Fine, divorce then. You think you can live without me?" Nick thought I, a homemaker, would be lost without him. That might have been true before. But now, I have a secret weapon. I opened my mouth to shatter his shallow thoughts. "No need to worry. I'm going to receive a lifetime gift from your parents." "Wha, a lifetime gift? What's that?" Nick and his lover looked stunned. In fact, this morning I was told by my in-laws about the lifetime gift. My in-laws are in poor health and it's uncertain when they might fall ill. They wanted to give me part of their assets before anything happened. Of course, I initially refused. I thought it should go to Nick. But my in-laws said, "We'd rather give it to you, Angela, who gave birth and raised our lovely granddaughter, than to a son who can't even thank her for a kidney donation." I thanked and agreed to accept the lifetime gift from my in-laws. "It's your father and mother's wish. They said they wanted to give it to me, not you." Nick's face turned pale. Understandably so. Assets that should have been his were going to his soon-to-be ex-wife. That's filthy. That's not right. Parents' assets should be inherited by their children, right? I'll talk to them now. If they won't listen, I'll take them to court. He glared at me with fiery eyes, screaming. I sighed at his shallow thoughts. Maybe it's time. Shall I deliver the final blow? Stepping forward, I got close to Nick and stared him down and said, "You're talking nonsense. Ultimately, aren't you to blame for disrespecting me and even having an affair? It's your fault for spending the money, right? Your parents' decision is only natural. Besides, do you even have the money to sue? Even if you did sue, how would all your past betrayals look in court?" Nick let out a scream as if squeezed from his throat. Seeing the demonic expression on my face up close, I could tell he was shaking. "Sorry, I won't sue. Please forgive me." He desperately apologized, but it was too late. I stared him down fiercely again and delivered my final words. "You'll be paying property division and child support. If you can't pay, I'll chase you to the depths of hell. Be prepared." Nick and his lover screamed and ran away. The real estate agent, having witnessed everything, said with a defeated stance, "Thank you. No, I'm truly sorry for the trouble." Feeling uncomfortable staying any longer, I took Sarah's hand and headed home. "Mom, you were awesome. So were you, Sarah. Thank you for fighting for Mom." Despite the situation, Sarah's face was smiling. I vowed in my heart to protect this child for life. A few months later, I was able to divorce Nick smoothly. The marriage that I had endured for so long ended with no problems, making it feel anticlimactic. I even wondered why I had tolerated everything until now. Nick, having really poured money into his affair, borrowed money to pay the property division and child support. His lover, saying, "I can't be with a poor man like this," dumped him and left. To add to his misfortune, the company Nick worked for faced a drop in sales due to a shortage of materials, forcing them to cut labor costs. Nick, who worked in the factory, was one of the first to be laid off. While it's sad, it's hard to believe he was laid off for no reason. Probably, the company started with the least productive and poorly behaved employees. Given how he had acted arrogantly at home, he must have behaved similarly towards his subordinates at work. Now, having lost his job, lover, and wife, Nick is just scraping by with part-time work. He has no motivation to look for a new job, settling into a life of working and resting as he pleases, which must be bleak and stagnant. But I had no sympathy left. I had done all I could by giving a part of my kidney to Nick. Still, he scorned me, and it seemed like karma had finally caught up with him. He'd better sweat to pay off his debts now. Meanwhile, making a living from the assets that I inherited from my in-laws, I started working on illustrations, spurred by Sarah's compliment that I was good at drawing. Orders are still few, but my clients say my work is meticulous and skillful. I'm determined to increase my clientele and raise Sarah proudly. During a rare day off, the intercom at my house announced visitors. Standing there were Matt, looking in a foul mood, and Sarah, who appeared unwell. I was speechless, more by Sarah's appearance than their sudden visit. Her complexion was as pale as if drained of blood, and her skin was rough and tattered. What on earth had happened to her? What's the meaning of this? Hearing this, Matt snorted. He then put both hands in his pockets and answered with a disrespectful demeanor. "It's simple. She says she's unwell and hardly does any housework." Ignoring my shocked expression, Matt continued to complain. "I'm in a crucial phase of starting a business. Having someone who can't even control her own health or help out is just a nuisance." I felt my anger rising. It had been a while since I felt such intense anger. I confronted Matt, asking if he realized what he was saying. Then he insisted unapologetically that he was only saying the obvious things, and said, "I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but there's no reason for you to yell at me. Useless, fat people are a nuisance. Take responsibility for her, you parents." I moved past my anger to a calm state of mind, managing to restrain my right hand, which I almost swung in frustration. "I don't want someone like you around Sarah any longer. She will stay with us. Please leave immediately." I supported her body and slowly walked her to the living room. We sat down on the sofa side by side, and I made her favorite apple tea. By the time the tea in her hand had completely cooled, Sarah began to speak softly. "My name is Gina. I'm a 49-year-old office worker. After a big romance with a university classmate, I married at 22, and a year later, we were blessed with a lovely daughter. My husband and I discussed back and forth and decided to name her Sarah. We were a happy family of 3 in a small apartment. But that happiness was fleeting. When I was 25, my husband suddenly fell ill and passed away, leaving Sarah, who was just 2 years old at the time. Since then, I have tirelessly balanced work and parenting. Everything was for raising my lovely only daughter well and healthy. There were countless hardships and sorrows. However, seeing Sarah's smile gave me strange strength. Sarah, I desperately raised, is already 26. Although a bit introverted and timid, she grew up to be a kind and bright young woman. She currently works in caregiving. Despite some difficulties, she finds her days fulfilling. Sarah keeps in touch frequently since moving out for college, sharing her daily experiences and work vividly. Yet in her personal life, she seemed to struggle with romance, which secretly worried me. Then one day, Sarah introduced me to a man named Matt, a 28-year-old, 2 years her senior, working as a salesperson for a caregiving products company. They met through work because her company was a client of his company. They were steadily dating, and to my surprise, they were planning to marry. I was so delighted that I jumped up from my chair without thinking. Having grown up without a father, Sarah was uncomfortable around men. But she brought home such a friendly, nice young man. I got carried away, pulling out Sarah's childhood albums and spreading them on the table. His expression, as she tried to stop me, blushing, seemed full of love. I wholeheartedly blessed their marriage. And their harmonious atmosphere made me confident in their happy future from then on. After their wedding, Sarah and Matt enjoyed a harmonious newlywed life, including a honeymoon in Greece, respecting Sarah's wishes. I had never been able to take her abroad because I barely get by every day. The photos of them happily posing on a Greek beach showed Sarah's utmost joy. Sometime after their return, they sent an invitation to their wedding ceremony. Their names written together, Sarah and Matt, seemed to sparkle. And I hugged the invitation tightly to my chest. They shared such wonderful happiness at the wedding, and 6 months later, Sarah was actually pregnant. Surprisingly, it was Matt who called to inform me of her pregnancy, joyfully telling me that he had just learned about it from Sarah. It was a day when a little shadow was added to the bright future I had envisioned for them. Sarah's baby was growing well, and she was soon approaching her due date. However, as her pregnancy progressed, so did the demands of my job, and I found it difficult to visit her. When I apologized over the phone, she would laugh brightly and assure me it was okay. But I knew that even daily life can be challenging for a pregnant woman. I spent my days consumed with worry and frustration. As these days continued, I finally found a moment to breathe. During one of my rare days off, I thought of visiting Sarah when the intercom signaled visitors. Wondering if a package was due, I opened the front door and gasped in surprise. There stood Matt, in a bad mood, and Sarah, looking terribly unwell. I lost words again at the sight of the two, especially Sarah's pallid, rough complexion and unkempt hair. What on earth had happened to Sarah? I quickly supported her into the house, sitting her on the sunlit chair in the kitchen to warm her chilled body. Matt, who should have been concerned, didn't move to help. Facing Matt, I couldn't help but ask sternly, "What's the meaning of this?" Hearing this, Matt snorted. He then put both hands in his pockets and answered with a disrespectful demeanor. "It's simple. She says she's unwell and hardly does any housework." I couldn't quite understand what Matt was saying. Ignoring my shocked expression, Matt continued to complain. "I'm in a crucial phase of starting a business. Having someone who can't even control her own health or help out is just a nuisance." I felt my anger rising. It had been a while since I felt such intense anger. I confronted Matt, asking if he realized what he was saying. Then he insisted unapologetically that he was only saying the obvious things, and said, "I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but there's no reason for you to yell at me. Useless. Fat people are a nuisance. Take responsibility for her, you parents." I moved past my anger to a calm state of mind, managing to restrain my right hand, which I almost swung in frustration. I embraced Sarah protectively and said to Matt forcefully, "I don't want someone like you around Sarah any longer. She will stay with us. Please leave immediately." Matt raised his eyebrows sharply and, after hurling some insults, turned his back on us and stomped away. I quickly closed the door behind him, eager to be rid of his presence at once, and rushed to Sarah. As I gently stroked Sarah's back, I suggested we move to the living room. She slowly stood up, and I supported her as we walked together to the living room. We sat down on the sofa side by side, and I made her favorite apple tea. By the time the tea in her hand had completely cooled, Sarah began to speak in bits and pieces. From the beginning of their marriage until early in her pregnancy, Matt had been a very kind and good young man. He had gone out of his way to meet almost all of Sarah's requests for the wedding plans, and patiently listened to Sarah, who wasn't very good at speaking. It seemed that she had found true happiness with him. However, as he spent more time in the competitive world of sales, his ambition for advancement grew, and his personality became increasingly self-serving. This change in character began to show not only at work but also at home. It became a daily occurrence for him to berate Sarah, calling her lazy while she was bedridden with pregnancy sickness. If dinner was slightly late or the bath wasn't ready, he would hurl terrible insults at her. Once Sarah went on maternity leave, Matt insisted that it was only natural for her, who was slacking off at home, to handle all the housework perfectly, even pushing onto her the chores they had initially agreed to share. Dragging her unwilling body, Sarah would wake up at 4 a.m. to prepare his lunch and breakfast, ensuring the house was spotlessly cleaned from corner to corner to avoid any complaints. She would help him get ready in the morning and, while eating breakfast, jot down each complaint he had about the food. If she didn't, he would yell at her for not listening properly. By afternoon, she would finish the rest of the household chores and paperwork he had ordered her to do, and then start preparing dinner. If they sat down together for a meal, she'd be scolded for lazily eating. So she took her meals either before he came home or after he had gone to bed. Eventually, Sarah could no longer taste anything she ate. But thinking of her unborn child, she never skipped a meal. After hearing everything, tears involuntarily welled up in my eyes. I hurriedly covered my eyes with my hand. But Sarah must have realized I was crying because she started rubbing my back. Despite all she had been through, she spoke dispassionately, without shedding a tear. A fierce anger at myself for not noticing sooner welled up inside me. I embraced Sarah tightly, as if shaking off the tears. I'm sorry I didn't notice, Sarah. It's not your fault. It's mine for not saying anything. No, Sarah, it's not your fault. You did well. It must have been hard. From now on, let's live leisurely, just like we used to. As I said this, Sarah's body began to tremble. I hugged her even tighter, and she began to cry out loud. I gently patted Sarah's back as we both shed tears, and after we had cried ourselves out, we had a peaceful, family-only dinner for the first time in a while. We then laid out blankets in the living room and fell into a calm sleep together. Eventually, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. My first grandchild was adorable and very dear to me. Leaving Sarah and the baby in the care of the nurses, I stepped outside the hospital with my cell phone in hand. It was to contact Matt, the father of the child and still legally Sarah's husband. I pressed the call button with a grimace. The first call did not connect. The second attempt also failed. I sighed deeply, fed up. I quickly pocketed my cell phone and turned back to the hospital room. For my daughter and adorable grandson. I thought that I would never contact him again, but 3 days later, Matt suddenly appeared in the hospital room. However, more than being angry at his audacity and insensitivity, I was taken aback. Next to him stood a garishly dressed woman, leaning on him as if they were intimate. Sarah seemed to meet her for the first time too, turning pale as she stared at the two of them. I asked him before Sarah did. Who is this person? This is Kristen. She's a colleague of mine and I'm planning to bring her with me when I start my business. Unlike Sarah, she's a competent woman. Although his words were infuriating, it was the closeness of their relationship that really bothered me. That must have shown on my face because Matt snorted, raised his chin proudly, and started bragging. Sarah, let me introduce her to you. This is my girlfriend. We've been dating for 6 months. She's not fat or slow, but a good woman, right? Sarah looked down, trembling as she heard those words. Her complexion grew even paler as she clutched her son to her chest. Watching this, Matt marched up to her bed and forcibly peered at the baby's face. Then, as if he had seen something disgusting, he twisted his face and stuck out his tongue, saying, "Ugh, the baby is ugly too. Takes after its mother. If it had been Kristen's kid, it would have been cute. Though, Matt, if you say that, maybe I should try harder, huh?" The two of them seemingly embraced each other and burst into laughter. Sarah was trembling, with the same vacant look in her eyes as the day she came to our house with him. Seeing Sarah's state, Kristen snorted and pulled something from her bag. She held it up in front of Sarah and fluttered it while saying, "So, you're Sarah, right? Here, take this child support and divorce him, will you? Oh, don't worry about the money, it's just pocket change to us." And they burst into laughter again. I was too stunned to say anything. Then a woman sharing the room and a nurse present for an exam outraged on my behalf and voiced their anger. Yet, even as they pointed out the outrageousness of the behavior, Matt and Kristen showed no remorse. Matt then pressed Sarah in a domineering tone. "Hey, you're going to divorce, right?" Sarah nodded silently, a small gesture. Unable to rebuke them, I just glared at the two. They left the hospital room laughing loudly, pleased with themselves. Following that, the physical exhaustion from childbirth combined with the stress of the incident caused Sarah to stay in the hospital much longer than initially planned. I took a leave from work to care for my grandchild and support my daughter. Each time I saw her weakly apologizing and expressing her gratitude, my anger towards Matt surged anew. 3 months passed, and Sarah's hospitalization continued, recently resulting in her moving to a different ward. Her new roommate, Aileen, was a pleasant person, and we quickly became friendly. Today, we were enjoying a lively chat, when suddenly the door to the hospital room burst open without a knock. Surprised by the thoughtless visitor, I turned to the door. Standing there was Matt, for the first time since that day. "Hey, I've come to visit." Matt said this and approached Sarah's bed with an arrogant attitude. I quickly moved to shield her. Although Matt was supposed to be banned from visiting, it seemed the message hadn't been relayed due to the recent ward change. I glared at him, on guard. Ignoring our reactions, he started bragging about his nearly launched company. Clearly just to boast. Despite our disdain, his speech rolled on. "So, I'll accept that baby as my heir. Hand over the child's custody to me." Stunned into silence by his audacity, Aileen, filled with anger, spoke up. "Excuse me, do you understand what you're saying? Shut up. Mind your own business." I couldn't stand it and got into an argument with Matt, who kept bragging about Kristen, hurling insults, and demanding his son. Our voices were growing louder when a knock at the door interrupted us. It was Eileen's husband. Our voices had carried outside, and he came to see what was happening. I began to apologize and explain the situation to Aileen and her husband. But Matt's loud voice overlapped mine. "Wait, the president. So, this woman is..." Hearing his flipped, foolish tone, Sarah burst out laughing. I too felt a surge of relief at his foolishness and said with a dismissive tone, "You finally realized?" Sarah looked straight into his eyes and snorted derisively. It turned out that Eileen's husband was a major client of Matt's. One that he had been extremely careful not to offend. Aileen and Sarah had become close enough during their hospital stay to share everything, including this series of events involving Matt. Similarly, Eileen's family-oriented husband, frequently visiting, was already aware of the situation and visibly angry about it as if it were his own. Matt turned pale and repeatedly apologized to Eileen's husband. However, Eileen's husband was firm, telling him he was apologizing to the wrong person. In a panic, Matt turned to apologize to Sarah, but his apology was clearly insincere, spreading a wave of disgust through the room. Matt tried desperately to excuse himself, but Eileen's husband remained stern. Finally, he was told to leave the room immediately. Realizing it was unwise to argue further, he left the room dejectedly. Afterward, this story spread quickly through Eileen's husband's business network. And naturally, Matt's reputation plummeted. Furthermore, Sarah had been maintaining frequent communication with Matt's clients by sending birthday cards and more. So when they heard of his terrible treatment of her, one by one, they ceased their dealings with him. Many of Matt's clients, who had seen Sarah as a good confidant and advisor, spurred by the angry wives and mothers among them, decided to cut ties. While Matt was competent at his job, his plans for entrepreneurship crumbled under these circumstances. He had to continue working at his original company, where he was sidelined due to his previous attempt to underhandedly steal company clients. And he became shunned internally as the word of his mistreatment of Sarah spread. Kristen, unable to fulfill the role that Sarah had, frequently argued with Matt, who had taken Sarah's dedication for granted. Her envisioned future of elite life with Matt fell apart. And unable to endure the surrounding scorn, Kristen resigned. Financial difficulties and constant arguments soon led them to separate. Later, Kristen came back to Sarah, demanding the return of the child support she had flaunted in the hospital. But my daughter firmly turned her away. Having regained her innate brightness and newfound strength as a mother, Sarah was not perturbed by Kristen's childish abusive remarks. Sarah, bright and strong once more, found a good match through Eileen's connections. Her partner cherishes Sarah and her child, and they are now living a happy life together. As for Matt, his downfall continued. According to Aileen, financially and functionally struggling Matt, who took out his stress on female employees at work, eventually lost his position and was fired. His pride making it impossible to hold down even day-to-day jobs. His descent into further hardship was easy to imagine. About a year after Sarah's remarriage, Matt, in a last-ditch effort, contacted her, suggesting they get back together since no one else would want a divorced woman with a child. However, Sarah was already remarried and living happily, leaving no place for Matt in her life. Hearing this, he was reportedly devastated. Now, what kind of souvenir should I bring today? Filled with excitement, I'm off to visit my daughter's joyful family, thinking of the perfect gift to take along. I'm Rachel, a 30-year-old office worker. I work in the designing department of a construction company, and currently, I mostly work from home. I go to the office about twice a month for meetings and conferences. It seems that others are envious since about half of the staff come to the office every day. My boss told us the workers in our department would continue working from home. The best part of working from home is avoiding the rush hour commute. I live quite far from my company, about an hour away. It's shocking to think I used to waste about 2 hours commuting every day. Although I receive a commuting allowance, which means no financial burden, it is physically demanding. Another benefit of not going to the office is not having to meet annoying colleagues. I get along with most people, but there is one senior woman I find difficult. She is Nancy, a year older than me, and an acquaintance from university. We were in the same seminar since I majored in design, and we had spoken before. This senior woman, who was not very close, started meddling when I joined the company. Feel free to ask me if there's anything you don't understand. I thought I could rely on her, but contrary to her words, she was not dependable. She was also assigned to the designing department, but was transferred to another department after about 6 months due to some issues. It seems she found out about my joining the company right away. A few days after I started, she invited me to dinner and said, "Introduce me to the male employees who joined with you this year. Some good-looking guys have joined, right?" Her main purpose was to get introductions to my male colleagues. I thought she might listen to my work troubles, but her requests were the main topic. Moreover, even though she invited me, she said, "I don't have any money on me. Can you treat me this time? I'll treat you next time." She pushed the payment onto me. We never went out to eat during university, so I didn't know much about her true nature. She continued to invite me to meals, and I always ended up paying. I had never seen her with close friends in the company. Perhaps she was disliked. It seemed she was happy that a junior like me, who would listen to her, had joined the company. At first, I had no acquaintances, so I reluctantly spent time with her. However, I soon got along with my department colleagues and stopped going out to eat with her. Honestly, dining with her was unpleasant as she only kept bad-mouthing the boss and other colleagues. Additionally, she boasts about her dating history with wealthy men even though I never asked. I only date rich men. I wouldn't consider a regular employee from our company. Just the other day, she insisted I introduce her to my male colleagues, which almost made me laugh. Holding back laughter, I accidentally spoke my mind. "Is that so? Do you have someone you're dating now?" Then she gave me a scary look, glaring at me intensely after I casually said something like that. I realized I had said something wrong, but it was too late. I had upset her. "You're quite cheeky. You think I don't have a boyfriend?" "No, that's not what I meant. I was just wondering who the wonderful person you're dating might be. No matter how much I tried to explain, her anger did not subside. If I had to pay for the meal and get scolded this much, I definitely wouldn't want to dine together anymore. After about a year, I began to decline her invitations. Lately, you've been turning down my invitations, haven't you? She said, sounding displeased. I'm sorry. My home is far, and it's tough. I promise I'll join you next time. I used the distance as an excuse to avoid her. Others in the department also said she couldn't do her job, but always acted so high and mighty. I learned from someone who worked with her when she joined that she got scolded by the manager because she acted important without understanding the job. Her behavior must have been so terrible that even the gentle manager got upset. She did her job without listening to her colleagues and was kicked out of this department in half a year. She is disliked in every department and has now settled in a role doing miscellaneous tasks in the General Affairs Department. Her relationships with men seem to be causing issues too. According to him, she approaches any handsome or wealthy employee, even if they are married. Indeed, she herself has said that she would only date wealthy men. Rachel, just because you're a junior, it doesn't mean you should get too involved with her. He warned me like this. Fortunately, the world has been moving towards promoting remote work for a few years now. This is great for me since I can do my design work from home. It eliminates the need for commuting and seeing that unpleasant senior. Around that time, I got a call from my brother, who lives at our family home. It's serious, Dad has collapsed. My father was living at home with my mother, my brother, and his wife. He had been fine when I saw him a little while ago, so the sudden news from my brother shocked me. I rushed to the hospital where my father had been taken, but it was already too late. My father had passed away from a heart attack. For about a week afterward, I was so depressed I barely remember anything. My mother just kept crying too. But my brother and sister-in-law bravely took care of all the funeral arrangements. I said to my brother, I still can't believe Dad is gone. Then my mother, who was there, said, You love Dad so much, this must be particularly shocking for you, right? But all I could do was nod. My father hadn't left a will, but my brother said, I'll take over the family home, so is cash okay for you? If you're looking after Mom, I don't need anything. I am grateful to my brother and his wife for always taking care of our parents. So I declined the inheritance. It's not a huge amount, so just take it. Dad would have wanted it that way. Convinced by her, I ended up inheriting more money than I had expected. With the opportunity to work from home and not needing to go to the office often, I decided to move a bit farther away. This would allow me to live in a much better place than I do now. I have been living in a cheap, run-down apartment since my student days. In this old apartment, I was always nervous about my voice carrying over to the neighbors during online meetings. If I had a room where I could speak loudly, I could work without concern. I had always dreamed of living in a nice apartment one day. For this reason, I had been saving little by little. With the money inherited from my father, I could afford a nice apartment a bit further out in the suburbs. I found a newly constructed apartment building at the perfect timing and decided to move there. The commute would take much longer than before, but it's only once a month. Plus, I would be traveling around midday, so I wouldn't have to deal with rush hour traffic. I took the plunge and signed the contract and moved to my new place. During an online meeting, I told my colleagues about the move. I've decided to move into a brand new apartment. I announced proudly, and everyone seemed pleased for me. Then, a female colleague chimed in. I've actually moved too. She had just gotten married and was bashful about it. Her husband is quite wealthy, and unlike me, she moved into a luxury high-rise apartment in downtown. Your apartment must be much bigger, right? She was modest, but her room, visible through the camera, was spacious with high ceilings. Everyone watching on the monitor noticed this and joked. Clearly, she's in a different league from us ordinary folks. Her move had also been a hot topic in the office. When she got married, it caused quite a stir due to her wealthy husband. However, within our department of remote workers, the more surprising news was about me, who seemed less affluent, moving into a new apartment. Because it was a new building, my colleagues were even more astonished. On my first day back to the office since moving, I hoped I wouldn't run into Nancy. I didn't think she knew I had moved, but I dreaded any comments from her. Unfortunately, just as I was leaving, I was spotted by her. Rachel, that's terrible of you. Not telling me something so important. We hadn't seen each other since we started working from home. Since her tone implied she already knew I had moved, I apologized. Oh, sorry for not having told you. I thought it was not a big deal. Hearing that, she smirked and gazed at me. So, you've managed to get yourself a nice apartment too? The meaningful smile on her face was unsettling. Indeed, I was able to purchase the apartment with the money inherited from my father. But I wondered why she knew about it. Thanks to you, it seems luck is coming my way too. With a smirk, she walked away. I was surprised at how easily she disappeared. I had expected her to nitpick or make snide remarks. Her last words were also unclear. What did she mean by her luck turning because of my move? I had no clue. Still, since she didn't invite me over, I could breathe a sigh of relief and go home. A few days later, the intercom rang around noon, and when I checked the monitor, I saw Nancy standing there. Somehow, she had found out my address and was holding a large suitcase. Hurry up and open this. I came all the way here for you. She yelled loudly. Even though you're supposed to be rich, you moved to some countryside apartment? And it's not even as luxurious as I thought. She spoke with a considerable amount of dissatisfaction, which was quite rude. If I let her into my apartment, she would probably stay. So I hurriedly headed to the ground floor entrance. I wanted to send her away before she bothered the other residents. What's going on? Why do you have so much luggage? To my surprise, Nancy responded with a triumphant smile. Your rich husband's child is here. I got pregnant. So get out. Even though she said that, I had no idea what she was talking about. Huh? But I'm single? Upon hearing my words, she cruelly chuckled. Don't lie so blatantly. I know you married into wealth. When she mentioned marrying into wealth, I remembered something. A colleague in the same department who recently got married has the same last name as me. Moreover, both of us moved, and Nancy probably misunderstood. Well, are you really pregnant? When I looked at her with suspicion, she suddenly faltered. Yes. 3 months pregnant. I continued to inquire. Do you know the husband's name? She mentioned the name of a colleague's husband, somehow having found out. That person is not my husband. He's the husband of my colleague. She seemed to be getting confused with just this one statement. She stared at my face with surprise, still not understanding. I'm not married yet, so it's impossible for you to be pregnant with my husband's child, right? Unless there is a time machine? Seeing me laugh confidently, she finally seemed to realize her mistake. Huh? So, I came here due to such a misunderstanding? She suddenly turned pale and panicked. What am I supposed to do? I even quit my job. I was also surprised by her statement. Did she really believe that she could kick out my colleague and live with a wealthy person? When she mentioned the other day that her luck had turned, it seemed to refer to this. Of course, the story about her pregnancy was likely a lie. Did you quit your job? She seemed too shaken to hear my question. Are you okay? What's wrong? Concerned about trembling Nancy, I spoke gently, and suddenly, she lunged at me. Tell me the address of that employee who married into wealth. With a face like a demon, she glared at me. It was obvious she was planning to go to my colleague's apartment next and pull the same stunt. I don't know. We never meet directly due to remote work. She kept insisting I contact the colleague for her address, but I kept refusing. If Nancy barged into her place, it would cause her trouble too. Perhaps giving up, she left with a large suitcase. I thought it was over, but I called the female colleague just in case. I warned her to be careful because a strange female employee I know might show up. That night, she contacted me, confirming Nancy had indeed come over. Are you okay? Hasn't she done anything to you? To my concern, she replied as if nothing had happened. My apartment has security guards stationed. So, the noisy woman was taken away by the police soon after she arrived. Truly, unlike my apartment, which lacks such measures, a genuine luxury apartment is well protected. That person was from our company? Since she seemed unaware, I informed her about Nancy. Don't worry. Apparently, she's already resigned, so she has nothing to do with us. We laughed about it. Nancy, taken away by the police, was released but got an earful from her parents. Since she had quit her job, she was taken back home. Furthermore, it was discovered she frequented nightclubs, showering her favorite worker with money, accumulating a hefty debt that her parents had to pay off. In return, Nancy, dragged back home, is now being closely monitored by her parents and made to work at a nearby workplace. It seems like she's facing the consequences for not working diligently. Thanks to that, I can live peacefully without ever having to see her again. She said she'd only date wealthy men, but I don't care. Since transitioning to remote work, I've felt lonely without any chances to meet new people. That's when I coincidentally ran into an acquaintance from my university days. He was a classmate of Nancy, and I was dragged along to the same parties she organized. We never paid much attention to each other during university, but we bonded over the shared experience of being victims dragged into those parties. Somehow, I found his simplicity and kindness appealing. From then on, we started meeting up alone. One of the reasons I considered buying an apartment was because I was thinking about marrying him. He's just an ordinary office worker, also working remotely most of the time. Since we both don't need to commute to work, we discussed living together in a spacious apartment. When Nancy came to my apartment and shouted about being pregnant with my husband's child, I actually doubted him. She knows him, so there's no way she would mistake him for a wealthy husband. If he were wealthy, he might have been snatched by her. Anyway, thanks to her, we came to know each other and are now getting married. We want to live happily in our new apartment.